Hello and welcome to the Unseen Question. Throughout history, people have believed a lot of things that sound, to put it gently, bizarre. Not because they came from evidence, testing, or reason, but because religion told them it was true. And once something gets wrapped up in the authority of the sacred, it can become almost immune to questioning. People will accept claims that, if presented in any other context, would be laughed off immediately. Take the idea that the entire universe, with all its galaxies, stars, and planets, was created in just a few days by an invisible being who had nothing better to do. Billions of years of cosmic history compressed into less than a week. And that's not a metaphor to many believers. They actually accept that as literal fact. Schools in some countries even teach this as a valid alternative to astronomy and geology. Or consider the claim that humans were created separately, completely apart from all other animals, despite mountains of evidence showing our evolutionary connection to the rest of life. There are still large groups of people convinced that humans were sculpted out of clay or dirt, breathed into by a god, and dropped into the world fully formed. And when asked how we can explain fossils, genetic similarity, or transitional species, the answer is often that fossils were planted to test faith, or that evolution is just a trick from some evil spirit. What's fascinating is how these beliefs reveal something about human psychology. People don't just want explanations. They want explanations that make them feel special. If the universe was made just for us, then our lives must have cosmic importance. If we're created in the image of a god, then we're not just animals. We're chosen, elevated, sacred. These ideas satisfy a deep emotional craving, even if they make no sense under scrutiny. And the funny part is how flexible people are with applying reason. The same person who would never buy a used car without checking its history might accept a 2,000-year-old text as absolute truth, even when it contradicts science, logic, or basic observation. They'll doubt the mechanic, but not the preacher. Some religious stories are almost cartoonish when you step back. A talking snake convincing the first humans to eat fruit that ruins the future of the entire species. A man living inside a giant fish for days and then walking out alive. A global flood that wipes out everything except one family in a floating zoo. These stories sound more like fairy tales than history, but millions of people treat them as literal accounts. And if you question them, the pushback is immediate. It's not a story, it's the truth. Then there are beliefs that aren't just funny, but deeply strange in their implications. For instance, some groups believe that bread and wine literally transform into human flesh and blood during a ritual. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally. If that idea were presented outside of a religious context, it would sound like a horror movie script. But when framed as sacred, it becomes something celebrated, solemn, and beyond doubt. Another curious example is prayer. Billions of people believe that quietly talking to themselves or speaking into the air will influence the outcomes of events, from curing illnesses to changing the weather to helping their favorite team win a game. The fact that controlled studies consistently show no measurable effect doesn't weaken the conviction. Instead, believers often say the prayer worked in mysterious, hidden ways, or that the answer was no, but still meaningful. No matter what happens, the belief reinforces itself. Some beliefs are even funnier when you look at the contradictions. Many religions claim their God is all-powerful and all-knowing, but still gets jealous, angry, or needs to test people to find out if they're loyal. Think about that. An all-knowing being that needs to run little loyalty experiments, as if it couldn't already predict the outcome. It's like a teacher who claims to know everything but still insists on giving pop quizzes. There are also the small, everyday superstitions that religion smuggles in. People crossing themselves to avoid bad luck, carrying holy charms for protection, or reciting verses to ward off evil spirits. These are actions that, stripped of the religious label, would look exactly like any other superstition, no different than tossing salt over your shoulder or knocking on wood. But when wrapped in religious language, they become sacred duties instead of quaint rituals. The really striking part is how many of these beliefs come with built-in shields against doubt. If you question the logic, you're told that human minds can't understand divine truth. If you point out contradictions, you're told the sacred text is too deep to be taken at face value. If you highlight scientific evidence, you're told that science itself is unreliable, or worse, a deception. In this way, the system protects itself. It builds a kind of intellectual bubble where no amount of outside evidence can break in. What makes this so fascinating, and often funny, is how creative people can be in trying to rationalize the absurd. When faced with evidence that the Earth is billions of years old, some believers will argue that it just looks old because it was created with the appearance of age. Like a brand new car made to look rusted and dented, only on a cosmic scale. Others say dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark, just squeezed in somehow. Or that fossils are the remains of creatures that died in the flood, which apparently managed to layer themselves perfectly by species in sedimentary rock. This kind of reasoning would be laughed out of any other field of study. If a scientist claimed that rocks were made to look old, or that animals shrank to fit on a boat, they'd be dismissed instantly. But under the protection of religion, those explanations are taken seriously. They're taught to children, preached from pulpits, and written into textbooks. The absurd becomes respectable simply because it's declared sacred. And this pattern doesn't just apply to ancient myths. Even today, new beliefs are constantly forming. Faith healers who claim to cure cancer by touching people's foreheads. Prosperity preachers who tell followers that donating money will lead to divine financial rewards. End times prophets who set dates for the apocalypse, only to reschedule again and again when nothing happens. What's wild is not that these claims are made, but that people keep believing them, even after repeated failure. Each time the prophecy fails, a new excuse is invented, and the cycle continues. When you really think about it, religion has built-in immunity to embarrassment. If a prediction doesn't come true, it's not treated as evidence that the system is flawed. It's framed as a test of faith. If a prayer goes unanswered, it's not seen as a failure, but as part of a bigger plan that only the divine can understand. That flexibility makes religion resilient, but it also makes it impossible to hold accountable. It's the only system of belief where being consistently wrong doesn't weaken credibility. It actually strengthens it, and it leads to some of the strangest double standards. A person who trusted a psychic, a fortune teller, or a conspiracy theorist after dozens of failed predictions would be ridiculed for their gullibility. Yet entire congregations can sit through decades of end-of-the-world dates, healing claims, and divine promises that never materialize, and still consider themselves the rational ones. That's not faith. That's the psychology of commitment and sunk cost. Once you've invested enough time, energy, or identity into a belief, it feels almost impossible to let it go. The funniest and maybe saddest part is how often people will bend reality just to protect a belief. Take the idea of hell. Many religions claim it's a literal place of eternal fire and torment, designed for punishment. Now, if you press someone on how a loving God could justify infinite torture for finite mistakes, you'll get some wild rationalizations. Some say hell isn't literal fire, it's just separation from God, as if that somehow makes eternal suffering more reasonable. Others say people choose hell because rejecting divine authority is like sentencing yourself. That's like saying prisoners choose prison because they committed a crime. It's mental gymnastics designed to make cruelty sound like justice. And what about heaven? The idea that billions of people will all live forever in some perfect realm where everyone is happy, and somehow nobody ever gets bored. Think about how long eternity is. After the first trillion years, won't the harp music start to feel repetitive? If eternal bliss actually existed, you'd expect boredom, madness, or exhaustion to creep in eventually. Yet it's sold as a flawless reward system, where every longing is satisfied forever, and nobody questions the logic. It's like promising a child they can have endless ice cream without ever getting sick of it. Some beliefs are funny just because of how specific they get. Certain sects teach that wearing particular fabrics, eating certain foods, or working on particular days can literally offend the creator of the universe. Think about that. An all-powerful being who governs galaxies is apparently enraged by shellfish or mixed clothing. These rules are so oddly arbitrary that they feel like inside jokes that got taken way too seriously. And yet, for centuries, people have treated them as life and death matters. It's worth noticing how many religious rules resemble the quirks of human authority. Kings demand loyalty rituals, emperors require bowing, and tribal leaders enforce dress codes. Religion often projects those same dynamics onto the divine. The god of a religion ends up looking suspiciously like the rulers of the culture that invented it, complete with the same insecurities, preferences, and demands for obedience. Instead of transcending human flaws, these deities mirror them almost perfectly. And then there's the idea of miracles. Stories of statues crying blood, or holy images appearing on toast, or relics healing the sick. These claims almost always fall apart under scrutiny, but while they last, they're treated with intense seriousness. Entire pilgrimages have formed around a stain on a wall that looked vaguely like a saint's silhouette. People line up to touch glass cases holding bones, hoping to receive blessings. In any other setting, this would look indistinguishable from superstition or magical thinking, but with a religious stamp, it becomes sacred tradition. The human mind craves patterns and meaning. When something strange happens, we reach for an explanation. Religion often provides a ready-made one, but the cost is that people end up believing things that, outside of that context, would be considered absurd. A baby recovering from illness is a miracle, but thousands of children dying of preventable diseases is somehow not evidence against divine care. A hurricane that misses a church is proof of God's protection, but the destruction of the town around it is never seen as proof of God's absence. This selective interpretation is what keeps the system intact. What's fascinating is how religion doesn't just influence personal beliefs, it shapes whole societies. There are cultures where people genuinely believe that natural disasters are punishments for human behavior. Earthquakes, floods, or pandemics are said to be triggered by sins like same-sex relationships or insufficient devotion. In some places, leaders still stand at podiums and claim that disasters are messages from God. Imagine trying to run modern disaster management on that logic. Instead of engineering better infrastructure or investing in science, you're stuck worrying about whether people danced too much or ate the wrong foods. And yet, these ideas stick because they give people a sense of control. If disasters are random, then the world is scary and unpredictable. But if disasters are punishments, then at least there's a rulebook. You can avoid earthquakes by behaving correctly. It's a false sense of security, but it's comforting. And that comfort keeps people clinging to the belief, no matter how irrational it is. The humor of all this isn't just in the details of the beliefs themselves. It's in the way humans cling to them with such seriousness. A grown adult can laugh at myths from other cultures, stories about thunder gods or sun deities riding chariots, while holding equally fantastical beliefs from their own tradition with complete sincerity. It's always someone else's religion that looks ridiculous. Rarely do people turn that same lens on their own. And when they do, the results can be eye-opening. Once you step back, it's almost impossible not to laugh at the idea that cosmic justice depends on reciting the right words, facing the right direction, or eating the right foods. That the fate of your soul can depend on whether you were baptized with water or sprinkled with oil. That an infinite being cares more about ritual than evidence, more about obedience than understanding. These are ideas that collapse under the slightest pressure, and yet billions take them more seriously than they take their own senses. What's often overlooked is how religion encourages people to treat contradictions as strengths. If a sacred book contains rules that clash with each other, followers are taught not to see that as a flaw but as mystery. The idea that inconsistency proves depth rather than error is a unique feature of religion. In any other text, contradictions would be evidence that the author didn't get the facts straight. In religion, contradictions are framed as divine complexity, beyond human comprehension. This also shows up in morality. Many religions teach that morality is impossible without a God, even though the same God sometimes commands actions most people would consider deeply immoral. Slavery, genocide, forced marriage, and violent punishments are all described in holy texts, and believers often go to great lengths to explain them away. They'll say, "That was just the culture at the time," or "The law was necessary in context." But when you step back, it's obvious that these are the same kinds of excuses people make for any flawed human leader. We're not talking about cultural leaders here, though. We're talking about a supposedly perfect eternal being. And the funniest part is that many believers don't actually follow the strict rules in their own texts. They pick and choose. Some verses are emphasized, others ignored. People will wear clothes made of mixed fabrics, eat shrimp, or celebrate holidays that mix pagan traditions with religious ones, but they'll still insist their tradition is pure. It's cafeteria-style belief, but most never admit they're doing it. There's also the idea that rituals themselves have power. Pouring water on someone's head as an infant supposedly changes their eternal destiny. Whispering a set of words before death can determine whether a person goes to heaven or hell. Think about how mechanical that sounds. It's like imagining the universe runs on cheat codes, where one wrong input dooms you forever, and one correct input guarantees paradise. A system like that feels more like a cosmic arcade game than the foundation of reality. One of the strangest things religion asks people to accept is the concept of omniscience combined with free will. Believers are told they have complete freedom to choose, but also that a God already knows exactly what choices they'll make. If your every action is already known in advance, then in what sense are you free? The usual response is that divine knowledge doesn't interfere with choice, but that's like saying a movie already written, filmed, and edited still gives the characters real freedom. If the ending is fixed, the freedom is an illusion. Then there's the belief in sacred objects. Pieces of cloth, fragments of bone, jars of water, all treated as if they hold supernatural power. In some traditions, entire wars were fought over relics, with armies killing each other for control of a box or a cross or a chalice. The irony is that the same believers who mock primitive cultures for worshipping idols or charms do exactly the same thing, just with more elaborate branding. Call it a relic, and suddenly it's respectable. What's equally fascinating is how many religions use fear as a glue. Eternal punishment, curses, divine wrath, all designed to keep people from leaving the system. If the only way to keep someone loyal is to terrify them with visions of torture after death, that says a lot about the weakness of the belief itself. A truth shouldn't need threats to survive. If the evidence were strong, people would believe without needing fear to push them along. And yet, the fear works. Children raised with terrifying images of hell often carry those images into adulthood. Even if they stop believing, the residue of fear lingers. Psychologists call this indoctrinated anxiety, the way early exposure to extreme punishments can leave permanent mental imprints. The belief may be funny from the outside, but the consequences for the person trapped in it are very real. Another curious angle is how religion often rewrites history. Whole groups have been taught that humans and dinosaurs lived side by side, that the Earth is only a few thousand years old, or that historical events happened exactly as described in their scriptures, even when archaeology and records say otherwise. When evidence doesn't fit, believers sometimes go so far as to accuse scientists of lying or conspiring against the truth. The idea of a global conspiracy against a particular religion is actually easier for them to accept than the possibility that their sacred text could be mistaken. It's also striking how religion often co-opts normal human experiences. Feelings of awe, love, or community are claimed as proof of divine presence. A surge of emotion during music becomes evidence that a spirit is moving. A personal insight becomes a message from God. A coincidence becomes a miracle. These interpretations are funny when you think about how one-sided they are. If a believer prays and something good happens, it's proof of God. If they pray and nothing happens, it's mysterious. If something bad happens, it's a test. No outcome can ever disprove the system. It's like playing a game you can't lose, no matter the score. Some beliefs take the cake for sheer strangeness. In certain traditions, people are told that invisible beings, angels or demons, are constantly surrounding them, influencing their thoughts, actions, and emotions. If you feel tempted, it's a demon whispering. If you feel comforted, it's an angel guiding you. Imagine walking around believing your every decision is the product of a supernatural tug-of-war between unseen forces. That worldview doesn't just sound funny, it sounds exhausting. Every mistake you make isn't your fault, it's cosmic sabotage. And the way these beliefs evolve is telling. In ancient times, gods explained thunder, disease, and famine. As science chipped away at those mysteries, the gods retreated into more abstract territory: the soul, morality, purpose. Today, believers rarely claim that gods throw lightning bolts. Instead, They say gods give meaning to life. The target keeps moving as knowledge expands. It's as if the divine keeps shrinking to fit the remaining gaps in human understanding. But here's where it gets especially amusing. Many believers think their particular religion is the one true faith, while seeing all others as absurd. A Christian may laugh at the idea of reincarnation, while a Hindu laughs at the idea of eternal hell. A Muslim may find the concept of multiple gods ridiculous, while a polytheist sees one jealous god as equally strange. To the outsider, every religion is a collection of bizarre claims. To the insider, only theirs makes sense. That double standard says more about human loyalty than about truth. One curious thing about religion is how often it asks people to take pride in not knowing. Ignorance is reframed as virtue. When someone says, "It's not for us to understand God's plan," what they're really saying is, "I don't have an answer, but I'll wear that as a badge of faith." In any other area of life, admitting you don't know is the first step toward learning. In religion, it's often the end of the conversation. That shift, turning lack of knowledge into a sacred posture, is both funny and tragic. It stops curiosity right where it should begin. And think about how belief systems deal with children. Young kids are naturally curious, constantly asking why. Instead of answering with evidence, many traditions hand them rigid stories. The universe was made this way. The rules are this way. The end of the world will happen this way. Once those stories are taught as fact during the most impressionable years, they stick. Later, when evidence challenges them, the emotional loyalty is already too strong. What's funny is how many adults laugh at fairy tales for kids, while still holding on to their own childhood religious tales with complete seriousness. Another fascinating area is prayer for trivial outcomes. People will pray for good parking spots, for a good grade on an exam they didn't study for, or for their favorite athlete to score. It's almost comic to think that an all-powerful being running the universe would take time to rearrange parking logistics or sports results. Yet people routinely thank God for finding their lost keys or saving their phone from breaking when dropped. At the same time, they'll accept the deaths of millions in disasters as part of the plan. It's this bizarre hierarchy where minor conveniences get attributed to divine action, while massive tragedies are brushed off with mystery. And then there's the way sacred texts are treated as if they contain cutting-edge wisdom. People will quote verses as if they anticipate modern psychology, cosmology, or medicine. But if you look closely, the supposed scientific insights are always vague or retrofitted. A poetic line about stretching out the heavens is presented as proof that Scripture predicted cosmic expansion. A rule about hygiene is reframed as foresight about germs. The text never actually explains these discoveries. The interpretations are added centuries later, once the science already exists. It's like watching someone claim Shakespeare secretly encoded quantum physics in his plays. Religious authority also thrives on the claim of certainty. Priests, imams, pastors, gurus, they speak as if they have direct access to absolute truth. Yet their answers vary wildly depending on which religion, sect, or denomination they belong to. If divine truth were truly clear, why would thousands of groups emerge with completely different interpretations? Instead of admitting confusion, leaders double down, insisting that their version alone is correct. To an outsider, it looks like a competition in confidence rather than a discovery of truth. There's also something funny about the way holy texts are interpreted to suit modern morals. Passages endorsing violence or prejudice are ignored or explained away. Passages that support compassion are elevated and quoted endlessly. This selective reading means the same book can be used both to justify oppression and to inspire liberation. It's like a mirror that reflects whatever the reader wants to see. But instead of admitting the book is inconsistent, people claim it's timeless. In reality, the readers are doing the heavy lifting, picking out the parts that fit their worldview. And let's not forget the sheer scale of detail some religions go into about the afterlife. Entire descriptions of the furniture in heaven, the layout of paradise, the torments of hellfire, even the number of virgins awaiting martyrs. These descriptions sound like they were written by people trying to sell a vacation package. Everything designed to sound appealing or terrifying, depending on the audience. Yet these travel brochure-style promises are treated as literal previews of eternity. It's almost comical how specific they get about worlds nobody has ever visited. One of the strangest elements is how religious people often use circular logic without realizing it. They'll say the scripture is true because it's inspired by God, and we know God exists because scripture says so. That's like saying a novel is true because the author wrote it, and we know the author is real because the novel mentions him. The argument collapses instantly outside of religion, but within it, it's taken as airtight reasoning. Circular logic wrapped in sacred language is still circular logic. And then there's the economy of religion, the way money and devotion are linked. People are told that donating will lead to blessings, or that funding temples and churches is a direct investment in eternal reward. Some televangelists even frame it like a financial contract. Give $10 now, and you'll reap 100 later through divine multiplication. It's essentially spiritualized gambling, yet millions fall for it. If any other business promised guaranteed returns without evidence, it would be prosecuted as fraud. Religion, however, gets a free pass. Perhaps one of the most humorous beliefs is that the creator of the universe takes sides in politics, sports, or national conflicts. Leaders will pray for victory in war, each side convinced that God is backing them. Athletes will thank God for a touchdown, as if cosmic attention were diverted from galaxies and black holes to help someone score points. This provincialism, imagining a deity micromanaging human affairs while ignoring cosmic scale, reveals just how human these gods really are. They act less like universal architects and more like tribal chiefs with favorites. The idea of divine tests also deserves mention. Believers are told that tragedies are tests of faith, designed to see if they remain loyal. But an all-knowing being wouldn't need tests. It would already know the outcome. The test serves no purpose except to cause suffering. It's like a teacher forcing students through exams when she already has the grades in advance. The logic is nonsensical, but people accept it because it reframes suffering as meaningful instead of random. The humor lies in how unnecessary the whole setup becomes once you think it through. And finally, there's the way people cling to sacred numbers. Certain numbers are seen as holy, cursed, or spiritually powerful. 7, 12, 40, and so on. Whole doctrines are built on patterns of numbers appearing in texts. But this is just apophenia, the human brain spotting patterns in chaos. If you search any large text, you'll find repeated numbers. The fact that people take this as divine coding rather than statistical coincidence shows how far the imagination can stretch once belief takes over.